Has EHG struck a deal with the devil? And is the devil necessary sometimes? I would argue it is, actually. Yesterday, the news broke that Tencent acquired a low-equity stake in 11th Hour Games, the development studio creating the next great aRPG called Last Epoch. This video discusses some viewpoints regarding the matter, which ultimately is an unfortunate reality these days and part of a bigger trend that's been ongoing for many years. I want to cover 5 topics: the history of Last Epoch and Tencent, the positives, the negatives, the ongoing trend in gaming, and finally the long-term implications. First, a bit of history, as I usually do, to provide some context. 11th Hour Games was formed around 4 or 5 years ago with a vision to create the next great aRPG. It started with a Reddit post asking fellow devs to work on a game. It turned into a successful Kickstarter in 2018 and the game launched in April 2019 into early access. And right now, almost 3 years later, it is still in early access with no planned release date. Tencent is a Chinese company founded in 1998, and in terms of revenue, they are the 7th largest company in the world, behind the likes of Apple, Google and Amazon. We can skip the good news here pretty much because there isn't any. The bad news about Tencent is that they are heavily aligned with the Chinese Communist Party, with the CEO even having a seat in Congress. They're enabling CCP propaganda by working with the propaganda department, by making political games and using their influence. They are censoring the Chinese people that use their applications, which is pretty much all of them, like WeChat. They're blocking all sorts of content that is not in line with the CCP vision in their applications, and they're passing data from people inside and outside of China to the Chinese authorities. They also have a history of blatantly ripping off existing games. In short, this isn't exactly a company you would normally want to do business with. So why is 11th Hour Games allowing Tencent to get their foot in the door with a minority stake? I mean, it's all about the money, all about the dum-dum-da-da-dum-dum. It's pretty simple, and let's not be too naive here either. I'm sure if you start digging into other conglomerates like Google, Amazon, Apple, whatnot, you will dig up plenty of dirt. You don't really want to know how your iPhone is produced or how people are exploited to deliver your instant delivery packages from Amazon. None of these companies are saints, but Tencent just seems like a little bit worse, because they're not only exploiting people like the others are, but actively supporting an authoritarian regime that is committing genocide as we speak. It's just not the same as American people not being allowed to take a toilet break in an Amazon warehouse. Money is important though. Money doesn't smell, they say, and it's all about the money. And money enables Last Epoch, which is a great game, to be developed further. So let's go to the present day, where Tencent gave a lot of money to 11th Hour Games. How much money, you ask? Well, I don't know, but let me tell you how much they gave, as someone who has absolutely no idea what he's talking about, pretty much like any other YouTuber out there when it comes to financials. Judd Kobler, game director for Last Epoch, said that Tencent owns less than 25% of the company, which probably means they own 20%. Otherwise, he would have said they own less than 20%, right? So how much would you pay for 1/5 of a company like 11th Hour Games with over 50 employees at this point and a solid track record of releasing content for 4 years straight? I think it's 8 figures, probably. Just a guess, but I think just 5 million wouldn't be enough, given the huge potential for profit for years to come. Let's just say it's between 5 and 10 million. That's a healthy investment to your company, right? That would indeed guarantee its stability for years to come, as Judd points out. Money is good, so let's look at the positives. This is undoubtedly good news for the game and its development if you look at this in a vacuum. Judd lists bullet points of improvements to be made and expertise to be acquired, and I think we can all agree that spending this much money on a game should improve it significantly. Hey, we might be even able to play a totem build with more than 10 frames per second someday, thanks to Tencent. Another positive point is that Tencent typically doesn't interfere with the creative vision of studios they purchase or get a stake in. Path of Exile, which is owned by 87% by Tencent, is still the same company as before the purchase. To many people, Chris Wilson trying to kill the game with 3.15 is proof of that. Judd also states they keep full creative vision and control of the direction of Last Epoch, similar to Path of Exile. But then, what does Tencent get out of it? In PoE's case and in Blizzard's case and in pretty much any other case, Tencent of course gets dividend as a shareholder, as would any shareholder of a company. So if a company is making profit in the long run, given the game is profitable, they will pay dividends to their shareholders, and that in this case would be Tencent. This also means that Tencent can put pressure on companies if the game doesn't do well. But there's more. Tencent is one of the only ways to get your products released in China. You can't just release a game in China because of the heavy regulations. If your game even remotely strays from the Communist Party's vision, forget about it. Tencent, however, functions as a gateway to the Chinese market, which is why PoE has a Chinese client. Blizzard can function fairly well in China as long as they ban people publicly opposing the regime, and in the future maybe Last Epoch can explore that market too, at potentially some moral costs. Then the negatives. First off, Last Epoch lost their indie game touch with this move. They can't play that card anymore. From now on, the stain of Tencent will always be in the back of the minds of people, and anytime a questionable decision is made, they will argue it is the Chinese influence. I tried to indicate that is not how Tencent works, but we're not all reasonable human beings over here. Tencent or not, Last Epoch loses its appeal as an independent studio, which is why so many people were rooting for them in the first place. And all of this happened before the game even released. It definitely hurts their reputation, that is for sure. Then, Tencent in itself. It's not a nice company. I'm sure there are gaming enthusiasts in Tencent, and those are the people Judd spoke to, and I'm sure he's telling the truth about their passion for the game and the fact that they've been following Last Epoch for a long time. I mean, that's also their job, you know? But I'm also telling the truth about what sort of company Tencent really is. This is just public knowledge, you can find it all over the internet, and the question is if you can separate the Tencent gaming enthusiast minions that Judd spoke to from the entire company that is clearly involved in some shady business. That's not an easy thing to do. I have left my personal opinion out of this for most of the video, merely presenting the way things are as they are. But the world isn't as black and white as people on the forums make it out to be. Is purchasing Last Epoch currently supporting the Chinese communist repressive regime? Yes, absolutely. You cannot deny that. Either directly because Tencent is working with them, or indirectly because of influence or taxes, although I think officially Tencent is based in the Cayman Islands, but that's a different topic. However, this is true for so many things in life. By buying an iPhone, you're basically condoning the way that product is created. By putting gas in your car, you are supporting the Russian oligarchs with close ties to Putin delivering you that gas. By watching this video, you probably are using a modem that is made in China. I think it is an honorable standpoint, a morally correct standpoint, if you say you don't want to support EHG anymore. But just be aware how far-reaching this thing really is. By taking this stance and by being consistent about it, you can't play any Ubisoft game, any Blizzard game, any Riot game, any game from Epic, including any game that uses Unreal Engine. You cannot use Discord, and you cannot do so many other things. You might as well sit in the park, read a book, as long as you don't use an e-reader. The point is, Tencent and other conglomerates are slowly but surely invading the gaming market, until there's almost nothing left you can do without indirectly supporting causes you do not morally agree with. A bit of a dire outlook, but this is the unfortunate reality. My point is, it has become almost unavoidable to indirectly support the Chinese regime. I'm not calling out people who boycott EHG and use Discord or anything. I don't think that is hypocritical. I think it is perfectly valid and morally just to boycott as many of these companies as you're willing to do. But there is also something that is called reality. And ultimately, it is your own choice and your choice alone. I, for example, will not boycott EHG, although I'm not happy with this trend in gaming or with the decision that they've made. It is just not a healthy situation if large companies own the entire industry, because ultimately there will be very little to choose between. Competition breeds excellence, isn't that what they say? I don't know, but competition is good. And now Tencent owns both PoE and Last Epoch and part of Diablo, you could argue, which just isn't helping the consumer. us, the gamers. But it doesn't stop me from buying a supporter pack each PoE league despite Tencent owning the company. And besides the game having loot boxes, which I fundamentally disagree with, I will support EHG because I still think they are a great company, but I just wish they didn't have to take this step. I say have to take because I don't believe for a second that EHG would have done this unless it was absolutely necessary for whatever reason. Financial reasons, game quality reasons, which can be led back to financial reasons. And then if you've made the decision to allow a low equity stake in your company, you might as well take it from Tencent, you could argue, who doesn't interfere with the creative process. It's just unfortunate they're having so many close ties with a regime generally regarded as not very nice. For the long-term future, the final point, there is now a much more solid chance that Last Epoch does become the next great aRPG. At least they got the funds for a while. But it may also mean that Tencent starts to acquire bigger stakes in EHG, ultimately ending up a majority of the studio. That is definitely not beyond the realm of possibilities. And while their modus operandi these days is to just invest and let game devs do their own thing, that doesn't mean it stays this way. It wasn't like this in the past in their initial takeovers, and there's no guarantee they won't change their strategy in the future for whatever reason. And then things could become real problematic if they start acting like Gamigo, for example, which just devours games and slowly lets them rot and die, scraping every last dollar from its community. If Tencent reaches a point of majority stakes in plenty of the games that we love, they can for sure start impacting game development. They do have that power at that point, which is a scary prospect. I can understand why EHG took this step, although I don't agree with it, but reality is something you need to deal with too. All we can do is wait and hope it pans out like Path of Exile, which is honestly the best thing we hope for at this moment in time. Which is a shame because last week we simply didn't have to make a statement like this and we could be 100% sure that every decision taken was not influenced by anyone in any way. But that is the way things go. A deal with the devil, but a necessary one. Thanks for watching and making it to the end. See you soon. Love you all. Bye bye.